Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
I call to order the meeting of the Committee of the Whole on July 23rd, 2025 at 6:32 p.m. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is roll call. Administrator, will you help us out?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. Mayor Harada Frada. Here. Alder Dantzler Jr.
Here.
Alder Gerhardt.
Here.
Alder Herbst.
Here.
Alder Jetzer.
Here.
Alder Lattice.
Here.
Alder Maldonado.
Here.
Alder Reichstead.
Here.
Alder Vaffadari is absent with excuse. You've got a quorum.
Thank you so much. Next item is the approval of minutes. I'll need a motion on the June 18, 2025 Committee of the Whole minutes.
Move to approve.
Motion
Second.
approved by Alder Lattice and second by Alder Jetzer. Comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Next is public appearances for non-agenda items. We have nobody in chambers or online for non-agenda items. So we can move on to item 6, agenda items. 6A. First is 2025 Housing Plan Overview and Process, Council Input and Next Steps with our Economic Development Department. Mike, are you going to kick this off, or Lorene?
Thank you, Chair Gerhardt. Appreciate it. And thank you, Council, for the opportunity tonight. We're excited to be before you. We did our first housing plan in 2019. We've made a lot of progress as far as implementation of the action items in that plan, but so much has changed in the economy and the housing market since that time. So we're really in need of a complete update with the plan. So we appreciate the dollars that you've helped to allocate for us to move forward with the 2025 update. And we're excited with the consulting team that we have. And I'm going to turn it over to Lorene. And then Joyce, Lorene, and I will all be here for any additional questions or information that we can kind of help supplement with our consultants as we get your input, feedback, and perspective. But Lorene's going to give a quick update on where we're at and then introduce our consulting team.
Sure. So we have Christian Fish Peterson, Dana Sarver, and their intern, Emerson Sanda, with Redevelopment Resources. So they have been leading our housing plan update, and so they're going to be sharing that information. I just really want to acknowledge how supportive they have been regarding the survey distribution, the hosting of the forums, in which they'll share a little bit about, and then really engage in the community. It's really been a great partnership so far. So this is just the first phase of the housing plan. This has really been focusing on the listening part, gathering information from residents, stakeholders, and community leaders just to kind of guide our priorities moving forward. I also want to thank FACTv because they have been really tremendous in helping us getting that information out. They did an interview with Kristen and I, also with the mayor, and then also just really in that social media, getting that information out. And I think it's been tremendous in the survey process. And then also to each of you council members of getting that word out through social media has really been helpful. This is really a team effort to get this information out to the public. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, again, is just kind of provide an overview of the first phase and then share how things are going so far, and then also create a space for you all to kind of give feedback on what you would like to see in the future of housing for the city. And your input is really appreciated and will help shape our next steps with housing. So with that, I'll let Christian and Dana and Emerson take over.
Welcome.
It's good to see you again.
Thank you, and good evening. I'm Kristen, Dana, and Emerson. Emerson's joining us. He's a student at USC, so he traveled here from Los Angeles through New York City on his way on a big tour of the country. But it's your first time in Wisconsin, right?
Yep.
So Dana took him out for cheese curds, and so he's getting a good introduction. We're excited to have him. He's really amazing at mapping and data analysis and stuff, and he's learning a lot, and we're excited to have him on the team. So I just realized I don't have a pen, but I'm going to let you write. Sure. Tonight, we'd like to do an overview of early demographic and market data. We'll let you see what we've learned so far in some early charts and graphs, and we'll give you an update on our public information gathering. And then we have some questions that we'd like to ask you. So we hope to hear from all of you. And we've already heard from Bill at one focus group already. So, excuse me, Alder Jetzer, sorry about that. And then we'll share a timeline to the completion of the study with you. So some early data, we have a map of the school districts here, and this helps us give us some perspective on your community, just to look at it from this lens. The map on the left side of the screen there shows how your community is split between the 3 school districts. The other side of the slide shows your Fitchburg household trends and projections by school district. So Dana, did you have help from Emerson, or do you just, Dana, this is Dana's slide. Just split the population and household trends by school district. Did you want to add anything about this?
Yeah, it's to help, like, as we look at different places that housing can develop, what's the capacity of the school districts, what has been their trends in the past. So it's going to help inform future recommendations.
Next, we have a median household income comparison for 2024, and then also a median home value comparison. So we looked at other communities in the metro area and stacked Fitchburg up against Verona, Oregon, Middleton, Sun Prairie, Waunakee, DeForest, and McFarland. So you can see where you land as far as median household income is concerned compared to the rest of the communities, and then median home value. If you have questions along the way, please stop us. The next slide shows existing housing stock by decade built. This slide is always very interesting to me, and it's clear here that Fitchburg is a fairly young community, because in every other community that we do a housing study for, that first line, housing built in 1939 or earlier, is always the longest bar. That's always where all the housing stock ends up in. The community has a much older housing stock. Then we see typically we see a pretty consistent construction by decade, all the way up until 2009, where it then takes a steep drop. Now here, yours was consistently growing and increasing from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. It took a big jump in the 70s, stepped it back a little in the 80s, grew more in the 90s, grew a lot in the 2000 to 2009, and then took a small step back, but not anywhere near what we're seeing in other communities. And then we're just newly into this decade, but you can see that it's slowed down from the 2000 to 2009 decade. That was a direct reflection of the Great Recession, where it wasn't just housing construction, new building that was damaged, but it was also that entire industry. We lost a lot of contractors, and many communities are struggling to get those back. Did you want to say anything else about that one?
No.
Okay. Then we look at this existing housing stock by structure type. So again, in every community, we look at the majority of the homes are single-family detached housing, which is on the bottom bar, your largest segment of housing. But then your second largest is apartment buildings or multifamily units that are in buildings with 20 or more units. Then you have a lesser amount in every other one unit attached, which would be a duplex situation, 2 units, 3 or 4 units, 5 to 9 or 10 to 19 units. Everything between a single family home that's detached and the 20 or more units, everything in between that is what's called missing middle housing. And I have purchased a book on it because it's very interesting to us. But missing middle housing is everything between a single family detached home and that high density multifamily residential. So it's duplex, triplex, quads, condos, townhomes, pocket neighborhoods, or cottage courts. And we find that many communities are missing those types of housing for that middle income or workforce type housing need. And the interesting thing about that is a lot of times it requires specific zoning to be even permittable to build. So we want to take a look at the demand for missing middle housing in Fitchburg and then make sure that your zoning codes are compatible with allowing that. The next slide shows the household income distribution based on HUD area median income, family income, and housing tenure. Housing tenure is either owner-occupied or renter-occupied. So this is where if a homeowner is spending 30% of their income on their housing, it's considered to be affordable, 30% or less. Affordable to that family. But if they're spending more than 30% of their income on housing, they are challenged in that way financially. So this chart breaks down where Fitchburg's homeowners and renters land when it comes to affordability. Did you want to explain any more about that?
Yes, because this one's complicated. So the slide on the left just breaks down your owner-renter tenure and by a percentage of the HUD area median family income. So it's not breaking down cost burden, but it's just showing you the relationship. So you can see that those households that earn greater than 100% of hand fee are mostly owners versus less than the 30% of hand fee is mostly renters. The chart on the right then breaks it down to of the owners and renters and by hand fee, how many households are cost burdened or severely cost burdened. So I apologize, I didn't add up all the how you can differently slice it and combine it, but your cost burdened households that are renters are on the left side of that chart, and the cost burden owners are on the right side of the chart.
A couple of questions here. I guess first of all, are you going to make this slide? Are you going to distribute this slide deck after the presentation? Okay, great. So I don't have to take such hard notes. Secondly, does it seem weird that there's so few people in the 80 to 100% AMI area there?
Yes.
Like there's a whole bunch of people making more than 100 and a whole bunch of people making less than 80, but not a lot in that.
And it could be because of what types of housing are being built. Like there's more incentives for 60% of AMI or lower than there are for that 80%. So sometimes the developers it'll kind of split that way.
Other questions about this one? The next bit of data is from local realtor. We did get this information from Jenny Sanders at First Weber, and this is about your local market here. Total units sold by type over the last 6 years, or 6.5 years. Looks like there are hardly any duplexes, but mostly single-family homes and a good amount of condos. But then the total units sold on the green line shows the strength of the market in 2021. Slowed a little bit and then jumped up again in 24 and is kind of taking a little bit of slow time in 2025.
And I can testify because I'm trying to sell my house right now. If anybody's interested. Little plug.
I think these people have to live here.
Okay.
The next slide shows median sales price by type, single-family, duplexes, and condos. And we do see the pricing in 2023 for the duplexes kind of went crazy, but otherwise it's steadily rising, which seems to make sense given what we know about the market.
Mm-hmm. But still going from $350,000 for a single-family home in 2019 to more than, like, not quite $550,000 just 6.5 years, 6.5 years later. That's huge.
And the last slide, we always want to know how long has a home stayed on the market, and the average or median days on market are shown here. And it is really remarkable that single family and condos are on the market such a short amount of time over the last 6 years.
On both of these slides, the duplex line is pretty crazy. Is that just because it's such a small sample and just like one sale throws it off, or what's going on there?
That's a really great question. I'd have to take a closer look, but it is a much smaller pool. There's like one that was sold for $650,000. Like, that just seems interesting to me. So I need to dig deeper on like what was the circumstances around that.
So that's a first look at some of the data that we've churned up already. There will be definitely more charts and graphs in the final report, but we wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the things we're seeing. And now I'll give you an update on our public input to date. So the survey is available in English and Spanish. It's also available electronic and hard copy. The survey is now open. It'll be open through early August. To date, we have had 250 complete responses and 280 starts but not finished. So sometimes people will get partway through a survey and they choose to not complete it. They'll jump out of it. But 250 complete responses so far is a very impressive, I think, for only being open for about a week. And we have 3 more weeks, I think. Did we have it?
August 4th.
August 4th, so 2 more weeks we can have.
Or 50, wait.
August 11th.
11.
Oh, sorry. That's another survey. Sorry.
So the more we have Lorene and others push it out on social media, we can see that every time a social media post has gone out, because the next day I'll get an email from SurveyMonkey and the responses will be numerous, and then the next day there'll be a little less and a little less and a little less, and we can always tell when there's another push. So spread the word to everyone you know that lives here. We do ask a question if they live here or not, so we'll qualify the respondents that way. So far, I've conducted 13 stakeholder interviews, and I did receive a list that was made up by the staff, and it has everybody on there from realtors, developers, contractors, school district personnel, small business people, large business people, HR directors, property managers of rental properties, and service providers or people who work with nonprofits. So, and I want to say that everybody I've sent the email to has been very responsive. I've been really impressed with the response so far. And I have several scheduled for next week. So the interviews are going well. Monday, we held a focus group at the Senior Center, and I think there were about 35 people in attendance. We had a great conversation around their needs, and I believe we had a very diverse group. We had people from every socioeconomic category and every place, whether they were not quite ready for a senior living arrangement and wanting to plan, to already being where they think they're going to end up. And so it was a great conversation. I think that they appreciated having the opportunity to share their thoughts. We had, it says planned focus group with staff, but that actually was yesterday. So I created this presentation before the meeting. So we met with the staff, and we had a very good distribution of department heads and across the board, from the assessor department, DPW, planning, the police, HR, senior center, community and economic development, just a really good cross-section of staff. Got some good insights there. And we do have planned neighborhood gatherings, and including we'll have some presence at the National Night Out event coming up in a couple weeks. So now we'd like to just open it up for some questions to you, and I have a few here, but the conversation can really go wherever we think it needs to go from your perspective. So the first question I thought we would want to hear from you is, how do you see Fitchburg growing over the next 5 to 8 years? In all categories, commercial, residential, industrial, institutional, just how do you see Fitchburg growing? How does that feel to you?
All right, I'll open up to the committee. I guess we can answer the question, or if anyone has any questions about the presentation before we jump into that. Mayor?
Yes, my question is about the survey and the outreach. Because, you mentioned that we are doing social media, and this is one channel of outreach in the community, and how we are outreaching, other groups like senior, like Latinos, the Black community, the people in low income, how we are doing the outreach, because not everyone goes to social media, not everyone comes to our website. So what are the things that we are doing to outreach and to have a bigger sample? And what is your statistical sample for the survey? What number do you have in mind?
Sure. We calculated that if we received a 1% response rate from 1% of the population, we'd receive 350. Was that 335? 335 surveys. So we're conceivably 2/3 of the way there. But beyond social media, Lorene, do you want to help me out? We do have hard copies available at the library, here at City Hall.
At the Senior Center. Mm-hmm.
It's a great question, especially about hitting the different groups. So I think in addition to doing some of the forums that redevelopment is doing, I think reaching the community, kind of going where they are. I've reached out to some owners of different areas, and they're willing to do like tables with me to kind of get the survey out. Also, some additional events. There's a backpack event that's coming up. I think actually you'll be at that one. But so just really kind of finding some additional events, and I'll kind of supplement where they're not able to go. So we'll kind of definitely hit all of those different communities. Did that kind of answer your question, Mary Julia? Okay.
Lorene, which backpack event was that?
Lorene?
Yes.
Do you want to mention the multifamily outreach?
Oh, yeah.
I was going to mention that too. Want to make sure that typically renters are not as good at answering surveys as homeowners are. So we typically have a lower response rate among renters. So we're really having a concerted effort to get it out to landlords and multifamily complexes to make sure that they understand that we want to hear from them too.
Yes. So we're posting in pretty much most of all of the multifamily properties. in their kind of like entrance where they come in. So I've talked to several property managers, and they're definitely willing to kind of share that information with the residents. And then also some of them are willing to actually send emails to residents as well. So we're trying to do multiple ways of approaching residents.
Follow-up question about that. Will you be able to determine when you finish with your survey from where the responses are coming, from which area of the city? That one will be I would like to know that, and I think we would like to know, because we have an idea, from where, but if we can see, it's coming from the more established neighborhoods, it's coming from some area where we have more rental units, low income areas. So it will be helpful to know from where those responses are coming.
So there's a decision tree of like, are you a resident of the city of Fitchburg? Yes or no? Because we also wanted to capture those that, they might be coming to the library or the senior center and they don't live in Fitchburg, but they use some of your services. So if they take the survey, we capture some of that information, and then it asks, okay, well, where do you live? And where do you work? Do you work for the city of Fitchburg, but you live somewhere else? So there's some decision trees there. But then if they're a Fitchburg resident, they're asked which school district do they live in. So that goes back to the map that was on the first slide of, okay, so then we can kind of tell, okay, based on some data that we have by school district, what percentage of respondents come from each of those areas, and where can we then target again?
One thing the forestry survey that's happening at the same time now, they were going to print out a flyer with the QR code and put it in the churches. And then most of them have bulletin boards. That's a pretty diverse cross-section of the community because it's in different areas. And yeah, that was just one thing that they were going to try to target, so that might be an option to look at too.
Park shelters might be another one to add to that list.
I also failed to mention that we also printed postcards. So we have 1,000 postcards, 200 of them are in Spanish and the rest are English. So we'll be also distributing those as well.
Can you share those postcards with us, because we go in places and we can, distribute those too?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We've had a number of surveys over the last, year or three. Do we internally maintain any sort of a template that we can offer for people who are generating a survey? For instance, the tree survey has a question on there, what neighborhood do you live in? And there's a long list of all the neighborhoods in the city, which is exactly what I think the mayor would like to see from this survey, but it wasn't in there, and it's probably just because we don't have any sort of a template in place, any sort of guidelines for when people make a survey, and maybe that's something we ought to think about.
Yeah, that survey, the tree one just came because they took the 2015 tree survey and started with that as the template, but I'm sure that's not standard templates. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Other questions about the presentation before we kind of move into the housing discussion? Anything online?
I had another question. So Fitchburg might be a little different than most cities in that we either don't have a downtown or we have about 4 or 5 downtowns. How does that play into your strategy?
We're in the information gathering stage right now. So once we gather all the information, we'll probably be able to tell if it will play into the strategy. I think, do we ask a question about why they like living in the community?
It's been a bit since I've seen that survey.
So,
yeah, I'd have to get back to
sure.
that.
Because this is about housing, we didn't really focus on the downtowns, but we are interested in transportation corridors and commercial corridors and things that play into why people choose to live where they do.
Yeah, and we do ask, what kind of preference do you have for the type of housing that you want to live in? Do you want, do you currently live in a single family house? Do you want to downsize? Do you want to upscale? Do you want a condo that you can own, or do you want to rent? So it breaks it down as far as preferences in the type of housing, the structure. But was your question more of like you want to be able to live within a certain like drive time of workplace?
I just, I imagine this is not what you typically see, and I was wondering if, you looked at that and said, well, yeah, that's odd. We're going to have to think about this or something,
Surprisingly, in rural Wisconsin-ish, I mean, Fitchburg is a suburb, but it's not that surprising. Verona, for example, doesn't have a true downtown. Like they don't have like the capitals or the county courthouse square. Another example would be like Oregon's downtown has kind of divided between what used to be where Old City Hall used to be to now on the other side of the city because they moved the post office and all that. So it's not that unusual.
Okay.
I have another question. So another thing that we discussed internally when we were looking at the survey was like, if we look at our staff, most of our staff, I would say, they don't live in the city. And it will be great to, I think there is an internal survey for them, Lorraine? Yes? Because it will be great to have their feedback because why they are not living in Fitchburg. What are the reasons? You know what I mean? And I want to, we are doing that, isn't it? We are doing that survey with the staff.
That just was rolled out yesterday, actually.
Oh, okay, great. Okay.
Couple questions from me. Have you done a housing study recently in Dane County?
Not Dane County.
Okay.
No.
So are you familiar with the Dane County Regional Housing Strategy?
Yes.
Okay, great. So and that's going to be a piece of the...
Oh, yes.
Are you familiar with the new document they have that's about zoning code reform?
Yes, and we have Lorene sent us the video and the notes to the zoning code change from the Plan Commission meeting.
Oh, perfect. You just anticipated my next question. Yes, because I know we're talking about that, which is based on those recommendations, obviously. And I like that I saw a news flash for the survey. I think we should probably maybe do one more of those before the deadline is hit. But just wanted to make sure that those were a piece of it because Dane County's already done a lot of work on what the region needs, and Fitchburg it obviously is very relevant to us, so hopefully that'll give a leg up in terms of what is needed for our community.
And I believe Kristen's going to be talking to Dr. Kurt Polson. And
I sent the email to him. He hasn't responded
yet.
yet.
I can push him then.
Yeah, we'll get him.
He's a good friend.
Good. Yes, Kurt would be an amazing person to speak with. And Olivia Perry would be good to speak with as well, if you haven't already. Great. Other questions from the committee? All right, so we can move on to the discussion, I think.
Gabriella, can I just say one thing?
Please, Lauren, go ahead.
I want to address the surveys themselves, that if maybe a household is using the same email address, they're not able to do two surveys or multiple surveys with one email address. So if there's a household that needs to do that, we have copies here at City Hall that they can use a physical copy. So just wanted to clear that up. Yeah. That they can, so like if a couple that uses the same email, maybe one.
That shouldn't be a problem because they don't ask for the email until the end of the survey. So they should be able to still.
Even with one email?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, great.
So you should be able to have more than one person fill it out per household. In the event that you get a pop-up that says you've already filled out this survey, if you simply open up Firefox or Microsoft Edge in a different browser and use the link that way, then it will take that too. Yeah.
Perfect. Or you can do the other option as a
physical or the hard copy works too.
Perfect.
Have we sent this out to city committees?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've sent it out to Plan Commission, Healthy Neighborhoods, and there was one other one, I believe. Oh, and CETA.
And housing
advisory, yeah.
Yeah. There are a few others that might be relevant, but It'd be good to, just because those are super engaged residents of the city, obviously. Okay, I think we can move on to the discussion section. Who would like to comment on how do you see Fitchburg growing over the next 5 to 8 years? Or I guess any of the other questions too. Bill?
Yeah, so, well, I guess, can you, so commercial and residential and industrial, I think fairly self-explanatory. What do you have in mind for examples of institutional?
That would be healthcare, education, higher ed, other municipal, if you had to build another building for another fire station or a police station or, but anything probably non-taxed, tax exempt churches.
Well, I mean, Wisconsin as a whole is fairly flat lately in terms of population, although Dane County and the city of Fitchburg are growing much more rapidly. So I guess I would assume that that trend will continue for the next 5 to 8 years, and so we're probably going to see a lot of residential, and along with that, hopefully comes, commercial that can be supported by those new residents. And Lorene and or Mike maybe know the stats off the top of your head for, the people who live in Fitchburg, what fraction of them work outside of Fitchburg, and, how many people live outside of Fitchburg and work in Fitchburg, and that could help inform, some of this in terms of, commercial, industrial, and institutional are jobs, and people who live here hopefully are working here, but a lot of them aren't. I don't know if you want to jump in with any comments.
I'm going to defer to Mike. Do you have any?
We've got that out on the website with the report from WEDC that's out there. It's got some community trends.
Okay.
Yeah, Mayor.
So if I look at industrial in the last 5 to 8 years, I would like to attract 1 or 2 bigger employers, but we don't have the land. Okay.
I said amen.
Like, to bring an employer where, can grow and we have more than 100 employees, good benefit, good pay, that one will be my ideal in the next 5 to 8 years. Commercial, I would like to see more retail, diversify, more restaurant, because I like to do investing and do shopping in the city, but there are a lot of things that I need to go to Middleton or Madison or Verona. And there are some retail that we don't have at all, like clothing, bookstore, all that stuff. Residential is, the market is going to dictate, I would like to see more the missing middle, I would like to have more, duplexes, townhomes, I would like to increase that portion of the housing stock. Yes, this is how I envision, I would like to see in the next 5 to 8 years.
Yeah, I'll echo some of what the mayor says. I agree, generally speaking, with what you've outlined there. I also think home ownership opportunities is huge. We just see a lot of rentals, and I will defend rentals as well because we have such a shortage of housing that right now anything is helpful. I'll also defend, super high-end homes that were built, because even though we need more affordable homes, when you build higher-end homes, that takes those more high-value or high-income individuals that want that more expensive home up to that expensive home, so that the homes that are less expensive are available to people that are in a different area median income range. So all housing, I really want an increase in all housing, but that home ownership I think is really tricky, especially when it comes to condos, because I think there's a real desire for condos, townhouses, but nobody builds them. Obviously there's some systemic issues related to that are above and beyond what we do in the city, but I would love to see more of that. And I know that we are working to incentivize affordable housing in the way that we can, because some of it is the market won't drive it naturally. We have to push it in that direction, and so want to continue doing that. But that home ownership, and then the missing middle is huge, right? Because we have to build homes that are smaller in order to get more affordable homes too. Like, it can't just be, and so that might mean duplexes, fourplexes, cottage court. I don't think we have anything like that right now in the city, but I know that that's been successful in terms of bringing a lower price point home into the community. So I really would love to see like that diversity of housing. Yeah.
You're not alone. We've heard that frequently. What kind of housing would you like? All of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will share, my favorite question to ask realtors is, what would you be able to sell all day if you had the inventory? And I asked a realtor, one realtor said everything. Everything across the board she could sell. The other realtor said, very specifically, he said, if I had product or inventory in 2-bedroom, single-story, at grade condos with attached garage, I could sell 2,500 of them, he said. But that's a lot. But he sees the demand. He sees parents wanting to move to Fitchburg to be close to their kids who are here growing their families. He mentioned that clientele type a couple of times. He sees, and I did talk to a banker who said they're seeing parents buying condos for their college kids. So they have a product for 4 years that they own, and then they sell the condo when the kids are done with college.
Which they make a profit if you notice the sales price
Yep.
jump from over 6 years.
Right. So it's really interesting dynamics that we're hearing in the market. These questions are more to get your thoughts and your opinions. We're seeing, we will have data, primary and secondary research to support all of this, but we just want to understand your perspective, where you think the city is, where you want to see it go, and it's reinforcing to us to hear you say we want more missing middle, because that's what we haven't done all the research yet, but we have a feeling that's going to show up there.
Logan. Yeah, I'll echo the call for missing middle, among other comments that have been made. One of the things that's kind of stood out to me is a fact that I saw from the Parade of Homes brochure from this year, celebrating their 75th anniversary. Just looking at, from the 1950s, the average square footage of a home was 1,612. 1960s was 2,040. In 2020 to 2025, it was 4,149. Now, granted, those are parade homes, which are obviously tend to be more high end. But I think about what could we do for affordability and for getting, young folks into their first homes, or having folks able to downsize after the kids move out. I think that's one of the hurdles, is when we're building single family, we're building so much large housing. We don't have, and because we have such a young housing stock comparatively, as we saw in your presentation earlier, we don't have those 2-bed, 1-bath, 900, 1,000, 1,200 square foot houses. Yeah. And I mean, and we have one development, a block from me in Swan Creek, that is looking to kind of do a little bit smaller houses, and we had some pretty substantial community pushback on that, which I thought was interesting about who would want to live there. And I'm like, as a 30-year-old who lives in a 1-bedroom condo and would love to move to like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 1,200 square foot house, I'm like, I would, and I not have to mow a lawn. That sounds great too. But I think that's one of the things that we're really missing too, in addition to the missing middle, is kind of that smaller housing stock of things that are 1,200, 1,400 square feet. Right now you'd look at a townhouse or a condo, and the prices of those are going through the roof too. I think in my buildings, a 2-bedroom condo of like 1,200 square feet has doubled in price in the last 10 years or so, like 340, 350 for what somebody bought for $199 during the pandemic. So clearly we need more inventory. And, I think one of the things I'd like to see is supporting the cottage courts, and there's a development in Mount Horeb called like Wildflower Village that's more 55 plus, smaller lot, kind of that cottage court. There's one off of it's Craig Avenue in west side of Madison, old, I think it was military housing, things like that. I think would. I'm sorry?
I lived there.
Oh, well then we need more of that. But I think that would be one way we could start that. It would be a good way to be kind of that bridge. It's not large apartments, it's higher density, but it's also less imposing, and I think a little bit easier to sell to folks who see our younger housing stock and our larger housing stock and say that's what we want more of.
That's really encouraging for me to hear, because after our senior focus group, I had this adorable couple come and ask me why I smiled at the mention of cottage courts. It's because Kristen's a big fan, and they're like, what do you know? Do you think we can get that here? So like to hear that the leadership is supportive of that type of housing is really encouraging. So I hope they're listening.
Micah.
Yeah, I mean there was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. It was like 600 square feet, that Craig Avenue house. It's when I moved back here from New York. I was living by myself. It's exactly what I needed, like at that time, to live in. So I will yes and all of this. And the only thing I will add is I really would like to see the commercial, specifically retail, follow the housing. That is, I think, there's a lot of talk, especially if we're building these starter type communities. I mean, walkable neighborhoods is the buzzword. Everyone wants to build a walkable neighborhood. What are we walking to? So if we just build housing, obviously we need that. That's great. 100% in support of that. But these walkable neighborhoods have to also have the services and the things that people want to walk to that make them part of a community. And I know that's hard. I know it's a lot easier to just build the houses and move on to the next neighborhood, but to really create a sense of community. And especially with addressing the downtown thing, I mean, it is what it is. But I think you can create, if you're going to create little walkable communities, you can create individual communities that have a sense of identity there and don't necessarily have to be the identity for the entire city. And so that's just all I would add for that. So, thanks.
Joe.
Yeah, not to be repetitive. I agree with almost everything everybody said, but I was talking to somebody in Madison that was talking about kind of some developments that are happening, updates of some of their corridors. And one interesting point that he just brought up is the idea of flexibility. So he was talking about an area kind of near campus and the increase of students and the need to be able to accommodate students, but also if that student population drops, that the housing would also be suitable for families or for, working people, working class folks. So I would just say in the housing that's built that there's some level of flexibility because, cities change, demographics change, needs change. And I just want to emphasize, what Micah was saying, that we have in our different areas of Fitchburg, kind of a lot of walkable destinations that people can go to, whether it be commerce, education, groceries, stores, other things that they need. And I'm a real big fan ever since I think Alder Jester shared a article about the resurgence of townhouses and just the energy saving costs that it takes to kind of build in the style of the New York, Baltimore type, brownstones where, there's no space between lots. I think that would be, cool to have more of that in Fitchburg. I know we have some of it.
Bill?
Yeah, I guess I'll just pile on to what Micah and Joe were talking about. But I guess I'm a big fan of vertical mixed use because that's the easiest way to get a lot of amenities within a walkable distance. And I don't know if the council is familiar with Jeff Speck. You can look up his TED Talk, but he's got a great book called Walkable City. And, he talks about how if you want to get people walking, you need to make sure that the walk is useful, safe, comfortable, and interesting. So useful meaning within a 10-minute walk, you can hit, you know, a dozen different amenities, restaurants, stores of any kind, potentially workplace, whatever, library, school. It's got to be safe. So, like, you're not going to fear for your life that you're going to get run down when you cross the street. It's got to be comfortable. So, you know, shading in the summer is nice. Making sure that the snow is cleared on the sidewalks in the winter, that sort of thing. And then interesting, which is basically how much cool stuff is there to see? Is there, you know, is there a diversity of architecture and nature along the way? So those are the things that I would like us to strive for. And I guess a couple other things I'll point out is that I think the most recent survey was 2023, the National Association of Realtors. They put out a survey about people's housing preferences every couple of years, and you know, the most recent one said that, for instance, 92% of Gen Z wants to live in a walkable community. And then millennials 85%, Gen X 74%, baby boomers 69%, and even the silent generation, greatest generation, 56%, more than half of all people want to live, 77% if you add up everybody, want to live in a walkable community. And there really aren't very many. You know, this is the kind of thing that zoning has, for the past many decades, kind of precluded. You know, single family over here, you want to go shopping? Okay, get in your car and go over there. I would like to see an end to that. And then, you know, so Gen Z has a very strong preference for walkable neighborhoods. And I'll say that on the other end of the age spectrum, we talked about starter homes. Those are also finisher homes, right? People tend to outlive their ability to drive by somewhere between 5 and 15 years. So again, walkable places are going to be very important in terms of preference for the younger folks and necessity for the older folks.
Well, I just wanted to see if Dave or Donald want to say anything. Do you want to talk now, or we can let the mayor? Okay. Well, the mayor, go ahead, and Donald.
I'm going to go ahead, Dave.
Okay, great. Oh, I'm sorry. No,
go ahead. Go ahead, Mayor.
Before I forget, is one of the things that you mentioned. What other thing I would like to see in 5 to 8 years? Something that is missing is entertainment. You know, what about museums? What about art? What about, you know, we don't have that in Fitchburg. And I'm always looking at another community like ours and say, oh, they have a opera house, they have a museum, they have, you know what I mean? Like Sun Prairie has a children's museum. You know what I mean? How we can bring that to the city too. I would like to see that, you know, like another bucket. And also, I agree with my colleagues when they say, yeah, we can bring all the residential, but if we don't bring the retail or we can walk to the places, we will become a bedroom community. And this is my biggest fear. That, yeah, we have all this housing, but we don't have the amenity. People to do shopping, they need to get out to the city. So that one is, for me, is the concept of a bedroom community. You know what I mean? I want to avoid that, you know what I mean? How we need to bring all of those, you know, the retail, the shop, so people feel comfortable to stay in the city. That's it.
Dave, go ahead.
Well, I'll piggyback on that a little bit, Madam Mayor. You know, we are a bedroom community because probably less than 30% of our residents live and work in Fitchburg. And, you know, we can talk about sustainability and all these things all day. But for a city to be sustainable, you have to have, if you live close to where you work, then things can be sustainable. You know, I live 2 miles, I ride my bike to work. I can walk to shopping. I think I live in a sustainable neighborhood, you know, single family housing, and it's a mix. But, you know, to reach those goals, people need to live and work in the same city. You know, I grew up in a sustainable city. We had a large paper mill that most people worked in. The majority of the workers in town lived within a mile. They walked to work. We had the city had its own dairy, butcher plant. It was a self-sustained city. You know, this was back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. You know, no longer that the paper mill closed. But you know, we need to we have people to live and work in the same place. Right now, we are driven, quite frankly, a lot of the housing by Epic, and great company, great company, and we thank Judith Faulkner for all the economic development in the county, but there's a large number of, you see it every day, the stream of cars coming out into Madison or into Fitchburg. I think if she would have developed her own residential neighborhoods for the people to work there, Verona would have been more sustainable. And that's where I'd like us to go. We talk about the land. You're right, Madam Mayor. We don't have these large tracts of land, but there are a few places we could find. But to be sustainable, workable, you have to live and work in the same place. And if that's the case, then you can have shopping close to where you are. I feel our growth in housing should be driven by the growth of jobs. So mainly industrial, commercial. The demand that those create should be the growth that we have. I'm not, I quite frankly, I'm not that interested in building lots of apartments and things for these young whiz kids to work down at, to drive down to Epic every day. I'd prefer they find a good job right here in town. So that's that's my take on it. The other thing, how we should grow. We invested substantially in the fish hatchery corridor, and it's been successful. We did a nice job on the road. It was very expensive, but we've seen growth. I think that should be our corridor for high density growth, and then other places, do that and the infill first before we start. Like, as much as it pains me, heart tongue, I would prefer that we got more. Finish the infill, like up the hill from my house at the quarry. That's an infill. Get businesses down in the thermal fisher area, fill that up. I think that should be our goal, and we can catch our breath a little while we do that. So that's my take. I know it's different than most of you, but that's how I see it.
Any last thoughts? Oh, Logan.
I'll echo a little bit of what Alder Herbst said. I would certainly, my preference would be infill wherever possible from an economic standpoint as well, that we already have a sewer interceptor there and we don't have to spend millions of dollars to run a sewer interceptor another mile farther south into current ag land. I think one of the things that I've noticed in District 3, especially kind of the eastern 14 corridor, is it seems like we have kind of a grand vision for Uptown is going to be this hub, and then we've got all these neighborhoods around it, and we've been building all the neighborhoods and the commercial that, it really hasn't developed yet. So I don't know if that means when we're looking at future neighborhoods that we need to have a smaller scale where it's, a little bit kind of more of that walkable, every neighborhood is walkable versus kind of centralizing it a little bit more, because it kind of frustrates me to take the bus and drive down Lacey Road, and we've got Swan Creek and a little bit of apartment development on Uptown, and then you go for like half a mile, 3/4 of a mile of just, technically it's ag land, so it's bringing in next to no tax revenue. And then you've got Terra Vesa, which is developing and has thousands of housing units. And I think once it's fully developed, it's going to be, it's one of the reasons I am so happy to be where I am, is to be kind of right in the center of the action. But we've kind of just been nibbling around the edges of everything. So I wonder if we kind of just started smaller and said, okay, every neighborhood's going to get, this little corner of commercial. And I think we do generally a good job. And I know at the same point, we also look at, I work on campus and see some of the retail spaces that are empty on East Campus Mall, where you've got 52,000 undergrads and graduate students walking by all the time. So if they can't make it work, it's certainly a harder sell in Fitchburg. But I think that when we're doing, the larger neighborhood plans and these developments, I think I want to shy away from kind of leaving a hole in the middle where, this is going to be the vision, and it'll be fantastic when it happens. But we've been waiting 15 years for Uptown, for example, and I'm really excited to see the UW Health Life Point Hospital, and some of the commercial that'll bring. If we could get a hardware store in this town, I'm just going to put that out there. I think that's one of the things I'd want more than anything. Ace Hardware would be getting quite a bit of money from me if they were in town.
Ace is amazing.
Yeah.
If I could say something a little bit about the mixed-use development, it's challenging because you've got new construction and you're charging a real retailer $30 a square foot to go in there. And it's hard because that's what the developer needs to make that sustainable for them. So the price of commercial space in a new building is almost prohibitive to the small type of neighborhood retailers that you want in your neighborhoods. I live in the Grandview Commons on the far east side of the city of Madison, and there was a strip across from the Metro Market, between the Metro Market and the Great Dane, that sat empty for several years because they wanted $30 a square foot. They wanted a coffee shop, but there was no drive-through. And even though there are hundreds of houses over there, it didn't really pop until they built a 142-unit multifamily development right on the property. So you can walk across and get your chocolate shop ice cream now, and there's a coffee shop that's there that's doing well. But it took a long time. And I even called them and said, do you think you're going to get a coffee shop for $30 a square foot in this neighborhood? And then Metro Market put a Starbucks in their grocery store. So Twisted Grounds is doing great, but it's hard. It's really a tough sell. And so any other type of retail it needs a lot of density, even a grocery store. So.
Bill.
Yeah, well, and that's what I'm in favor of.
Yeah.
But I guess more directly to your second and third question there, infill is my preference as well. And then in terms of barriers to growth or development, I think you mentioned one is that rents are just crazy. We had a bike shop in Fitchburg for a while, and they had to move out when the rents tripled. A different bike shop moved in, and they had some temporary agreement for a lower rent, and once the rent went up, they had to move out as well. So that's a barrier. And I guess just, whoever currently owns the place is going to be reluctant to do any sort of a major overhaul. That's a barrier. And then obviously, I think everybody would rather own than rent for the most part. And the lack of, or the hurdles you have to jump through to build condos is just insane, and that I would say is another huge barrier.
You're right.
Okay, so we're talking about number 3 now?
Yeah,
okay.
We can bounce it around, yeah.
Okay, so regarding one of the barriers is, I agree, we need to go to start working infill and out, But the problem is we have a lot of infill land that the owners, they don't want to sell, or they're asking insane amount of money. So for a developer to bring a project, it had to be a lot of density, or it doesn't work, the numbers are not there. So that one is one of the barriers that I can see right now is happening is, yes, there are a couple of, I don't know how much land, I don't remember, less than $1,000 acres we have in Finland. But maybe that we have a small number of landowners that they hold those land hostage, because they don't sell it. And so my other concern, my other barrier is the price of the land here, that one. Landowners that they are, asking for this insane amount of money, they don't want to sell. Our zoning code, it had to be more flexible, so we want to allow some of these, more duplexes, quadruplexes. We need to, our zoning code doesn't allow it right now. Accessory dwelling unit, we need to have those, in our code. The other thing is, what it concerns me the most right now is if I look how many buildable lots that we have in the next 2 or 3 years, is very scary in the city. And that one is one of my big concerns, but there is not enough land to develop new neighborhoods right now. And I think, yeah, we have Greenfield. Greenfield, even when we approve Greenfield, we are not going to be able to do anything in that neighborhood. We know that.
Careful there. This is Greenfield lowercase g, just meaning we're
yeah,
building
no, but
on.
I am talking about the Greenfield and the Southstone.
Sure.
Because there are two. No, I get it. I am talking about the two neighborhood plan that they are, we are working, and they're going to supposedly open more land to develop the build houses. Greenfield, we cannot touch it, because in order to happen phase one, the owners they need to be able to sell their land, and they're not going to do it, okay? And the South Stony Prairie, that other neighborhood, we have a quarry there that is still operating, and it's going to take a couple of years to close. So that land is not also going to be available for at least 5 years. So we look at the next 2 or 3 years where we are going to grow. Okay, that's it.
All right, next is, Dave, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, if I could suggest something, we hear all the time all these obstacles to condos. They have to have 50% sold, all these things. And it frustrates me. Maybe we ought to look at, we both know bankers, we both know business people, get some of the minds together in Fitchburg and say, let's find there's venture capitalists, that might be willing to put the money, the other 50%. They're going to sell. There's no question they're going to sell unless we run into 2008 again where something's crazy. And, I'm not satisfied with, hearing the developers just come in and say, we can't do condos because of this or that. Well, they can't. They're not as profitable for them. They want to do what's most profitable for them, and I don't blame them. They're business people, but I'm not willing to just accept, we can't do condos because of federal regulations on lending and things that, let's find a way, I guess, is what I'm
a banker
saying.
yesterday or Monday that is very creative, and his goal is not to work hard and make money for the bank. His goal is to get people into home ownership options, and so he's looking at all kinds of creative. He would be one to sit at the table with, and we can.
Is there a banker in Fitchburg here?
Mm-hmm.
I bet I know him.
So agreed on that, and I would say almost the exact same thing about mixed-use retail, so with retail on the bottom. I understand that not having retail on the bottom is more profitable for the business, or for the developer, but we need to find a way to make that happen anyway, because that is the type of community that everyone wants to design, and so we need to find a way to make it happen. So, I basically echo the exact same sentiment as condos.
Retail on the bottom is more affordable, more realistic if we don't have to put in structured parking, for instance. So if we build truly walkable neighborhoods connected by fast, frequent, reliable transit, people don't need to own nearly as many cars, and we can use actual revenue generating and useful occupants.
And I am almost specifically talking about, Fish Hatchery Road, that's where we want this kind of infill to go, and that's exactly where that would be successful. So, yeah.
Yeah, Mike and Lorene, I might be interested to bring that as a topic at some point about first floor retail. I had a conversation with Altera Homes, who does a lot of the development in Terra Vesa, about how they were able to do their first floor retail, Flight and Tati. And my understanding is that they put a significant investment in those properties. Like they built out, they spent $150,000 or $200,000 building out those businesses so that they could, of their own money, and they're going to make that back obviously in rent, but not every developer is willing to do that. But it was interesting to learn more about why. It would be interesting to explore that, since it is such a thing that's nice to have, and doing it well is important, because we don't want a bunch of vacant business space at the first floor of a business either, even though it's important to have. Julia.
Yeah, the other thing I will mention, that if we are doing affordable, an affordable multifamily, and we are providing TIF funding, maybe we should, be more intentional. Let's say we want to have some retail, in the first floor. because since we are providing already TIF funding, we can incentivize them to have it. If we are talking about affordable housing, multifamily, that's something that we can consider in the future. This is another way that we can help them to find tenant for the place. I don't know.
All right. Any final thoughts? I would like to start wrapping this up. Looks like we've had a great conversation here. I don't see any hands. So obviously there's more opportunities to weigh in. There'll be more listening sessions, focus groups, or can you kind of just give a sense for anyone that's watching? Sure. What are next steps? How should people participate before we start moving into the next phase?
As far as participation, still please fill out the survey. Look for it on the city's website or in social media. Hard copies at the senior center, the library, city hall. If you're living in an apartment, please check your bulletin board for a QR code. We do plan to be at some neighborhood events that have not been scheduled yet, right?
McKee's Splash Pad, you'll be at that in August.
August 12th, is it?
I believe so. And then also the backpack event as well.
Yep.
The community night out.
Lauren, tomorrow you can go to the FACTv for the Fitchburg business after hours.
That's right, I'll be there.
Okay.
So.
When you know the dates, can you email us? Just
Absolutely.
So thank you.
The farmers market. Have we talked about the farmers market at all?
I think there's a conflict of interest of doing that, from my understanding.
Oh.
So, but I can.
Is there?
I'll check into it, but yeah.
Oh.
You have it up on the bulletin board at City Hall entrance and in the library and stuff too?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Also-
Lorene, are you going to the Southdale Resource Fair too? On was that the 14th of August?
That's the event that I was referring to.
Okay.
Yes.
Final thoughts, Mike?
Just tomorrow morning, there'll be meeting with a joint meeting of Housing Advisory Committee and CETA
Thank you.
well to engage with both of those groups. So that's one of the next steps. First thing in the morning.
I'd like to share our timeline to completion too. So this is where we're at in the project right now, continuing on in July with interviews and focus groups, the survey, community events, neighborhood meetings will be maybe some in July, but August. And then Dana will be wrapping up the demographic, geographic, and economic data gathering, and we'll create an existing conditions, trends, and projections report in the next couple of months, including housing availability, affordability, and accessibility analysis. We'll work on the projections and gap analysis coming up in the next couple of months as well. And then we'll start developing our housing strategies and policies, recommendations, an implementation plan, with final deliverables being worked through the process towards the end of the year, and presentations to stakeholders, including CETA, the Housing Advisory Board, and the City Council in late this year into January. We want to make sure we have time to test our recommendations and get them right. So,
Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. We look forward to kind of seeing the rest of the process. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, our second agenda item of the night is municipal budgeting and budget priorities discussion with our finance director, Misty Dodge. This is an annual presentation that we do every year for our new council members, and always something new to learn. And can't believe it's already budget season. It's always budget season.
It's winter and road or winter and budget season, just like winter and road construction.
Sorry, let me get set up quick. Cool. So I'll say a lot of the presentation is very similar to other years, and a lot overlaps with what we talked about last time I was here in anticipation of the CIP process. So while there are 55 slides, I don't intend to go through a lot of them. I like to have it all together in one package so that you have it to refer back to, but there's maybe 12 that I actually intend to talk about. So just to kind of lay a little bit better of expectations.
Is it okay if we jump in with questions as you go?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
that's great.
Encourage our new council members as well to jump in with questions.
Yeah. So we've talked about in the past why we do a CIP, and as you know, amendments were due yesterday, so we're kind of in the middle of that process, and then that flows into budget, which is kind of the next big process that we're starting. So just to remind everybody, why we do the annual budget process in the first place. So what it does is it's a policy setting or a priority setting document, right? So you decide what level of services we will be providing to our residents and the people that enjoy Fitchburg, what it costs to provide those services, what other revenues we get to help pay for those, and then whatever that difference is how much property taxes we need to collect in order to pay for our budget. And so really the purpose of the budget is to set those priorities, but then also to set the property tax levy, which is how much total taxes we need to collect. So I have all the slides in here about, how we spend our money, just real quickly. So the majority of our budget is on public safety. Majority of our budget, looking not at departments, but on classes, on personnel. And then most of our budget is funded by property taxes. I will remind everybody real quick that the property tax bill is only about a third for the city budget. And we will spend a little bit of time talking about how those property tax bills are calculated. And I know y'all know, but it's just a nice refresher to kind of go through it. So all of this is from the past. So how property tax bills are calculated. So there is the assessed value and the equalized value. So the assessed value is when our city assessor and his team goes out to all of the properties, and they have a very data-driven methodology where they determine based on that particular property what that assessed value would be. So that is property by property, very data-driven process. Then there's also the equalized value. That is set by the state. That is a very high-level global number. So they don't look property by property, they look in total. So if the city assessor says that the property by property value is this, they look at what the sales are and they come up with some magic box thing that they do to come up with what the city's total equalized value is. And so that equalized value is intended to be comparable to market value. The reason why we do that is so that when we're trying to compare ourselves to other communities, or when taxpayers are trying to compare themselves to other communities, they have some sort of an closer to apples comparison, as opposed to comparing, say, Fitchburg that does revals every other year to another community that might not do revals for 10 years because they're not growing as fast and they don't put their effort into that. So the equalized value is intended to be a comparison method, but is not nearly as precise as what our assessed value is. And so once you set the budget, you tell me how much money we need to collect in total. And then we take that as, actually, let me start over. So I use the analogy of the chocolate cake, which those of you who've been here for a while remember this one. So the first step is we pass the budget and you tell me how much of a cake I need to collect from property taxes. And then Fitchburg does it, Verona School District does it, Madison School District does it, MATC does it, like all of our overlying jurisdictions does that. And so I have all these layers of chocolate cake that I need to collect in property taxes from everybody. Then we figure out what the tax increment amount is going to be. So properties that are within a TID have to pay the same property tax rate as all other properties within the city, but that money, instead of going to pay for all of those budgets, going to pay for the cake, it instead gets diverted to the tax increment fund that we manage in order to pay for the costs of the TID. And so I like to think of that as the frosting. So we've got the cakes that we've got from all of our budgets, we've got the frosting we put on top for the TID money that we need to collect at the same rate. And then the last step would be figuring out how do we take that cake now and allocate it to each property owner. And so that allocation is done based on that assessed value. So if you are hypothetically 1% of the total city's value, you would get a piece of cake that's 1% of that total pie. And so as the properties are different values, you can see how that percentage would shift. And so I know we get into a lot of discussion around reval time about, my property went up 20% or my property went up 10% and how that differs. And the reason why those changes in assessed value don't correlate exactly to increases in property taxes is because of this cake. So if I have that same cake that I need to collect regardless of what everybody's values are, it's just a matter of how big your piece is. That is what the assessed value drives. And so if your property goes up by more or less the same percentage as everybody else's, then your piece of that cake is the same. And so your property taxes would be the same, all else equal. And so I have a bunch of examples in here that try to describe that nuance a little bit differently. I'm not going to go through them, but just because some people think in spreadsheets like I do and some people don't, but that is in there for you. There's also some additional resources. These ones I've shared in the past. One new one that I wanted to highlight quick is this white paper that was done titled Revaluation and Property Taxes. Do higher property values mean higher taxes? It was done by Forward Analytics, and it's intended for property owners, for media, for you guys to help kind of demystify this whole process. And so this is it's a good read. It does a nice job kind of breaking it down in more understandable language than what Misty would use. So I think that could be a good resource for you to help understand it, but then also maybe help pass that information on to our property owners that tend to still be confused by this topic. I guess any questions there? I'll pause for a second. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess kind of stepping back all the way to your first slide, you've got state aids and other, intergovernmental blah, blah, blah. Yep. And I know that you're not a fan of structural deficits. So
we'll have a slide on that later. Yep.
So I'm just wondering, how steady do we feel like all of those? So like how much of our budget is that, and how steady are those numbers? And do you ever get nervous that some of that's going to dry up and it's going to affect, we might have to lay someone off, for instance?
Yeah. So a big part of our goal as a council is to make sure that we don't have structural deficits so that we don't have to get to such an extreme point of laying off staff. Because really we're an employer, we want to be an employer of choice, and we want to continue to provide those services to our taxpayers and our residents and everybody. So we really want to avoid situations where we'd have to talk about that. But we are very intentional in our budget to avoid those conversations. So I put up the slide that looks at our general fund, which is our primary fund for the bulk of the stuff that we do. And so yes, 60% of it almost is property taxes, which is our biggest amount. The next piece in this chart would be other financing sources. That is artificially high because it includes that strategy from last year where I'm moving money from the general fund to the capital projects fund, like that checking to savings transfer in order to retain our expenditure restraint capacity. So there's like $3 million that's in there that is a strategy that doesn't really impact the budget. So that percentage is artificially high there, and is, when that goes away, is not a problem. If you look at the next bigger piece, the intergovernmental aid, I think that's the one that you were more talking about. So this would include shared revenue, general transportation aid, other county aid that we get, state aid, federal aid, all of that is in here. That's 16% of our budget. That is, it's a healthy chunk, right? Like it's a good thing. I'd say most of the aids that we get from the state are relatively stable. There's some nuances in each one, but there are a lot of guardrails that help, if you are going to lose the aid, that it'll phase out as opposed to being gone completely. And then it is unlikely, though, that aids will increase at the same rate as what we'd need them to increase if we were going to continue to rely on that funding. So double-edged sword there, where they phase out slowly, but they don't necessarily go up. And then other things we get, so fines and forfeitures, and then licenses and permits are relatively small chunks. These two pieces in particular, and then also the miscellaneous revenue, which would include our interest revenue. Those are a couple of buckets that we currently, in the past couple of years, have been getting higher revenue than what we have been normally expecting because our market is going really well, construction is still moving really well. But we purposely budget at a number that is conservative, that we know will hit every year, so that when, if, hopefully not, but probably sometime things change, we don't have a big hole, a big gap that we have to fill because of that. So we budget at a conservative level. We are building up that money then, and then that's how we've been funding a lot of our capital improvement plans, like that transfer I was talking about. A lot of that is funded by those conservative estimates that have been coming in higher lately. The nice thing is, though, we are protected. So if, like during COVID, right? So lots of things changed during COVID. We were able to weather that here in Wisconsin in particular better than a lot of other communities.
Can I state something? You can tell me if I'm right or wrong.
Absolutely.
So I think we've started to do a better job of communicating, at least getting out the idea of the difference between assessments and taxes. And I think it's starting to go a little better with those conversations. I think there's still some confusion around the equalized value part of it. Mm-hmm. So am I correct in stating that, so there's a kind of another cake of Verona and Madison and Oregon schools. And what the equalized value does is it makes a cake for all of them together. And so that then if we do a reassessment and Verona doesn't, we're not magically all of a sudden paying more for Verona schools than Verona residents are. And it's the same thing for the county. There's a county cake that has everyone in it. And that's kind of what that equalized value does, is create that cake for each of the separate items on the tax bill. Is that a...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
We're going to keep going with cake.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how I can incorporate that. Is it a piece, a
bunt cake,
cut of the cake,
cookies?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll come up with some chocolate-laden analogy. Any other questions before I move on? Excellent. So forgive me while I scroll through again really quickly. The other budget constraints obviously is a big conversation as we go into the budget. We talked about these a lot last time. So it's first, of course, would be the taxpayer's ability and willingness to pay. Then it's that optional expenditure restraint incentive program. I'll tell you, I don't think that will be a problem again for this year because we have that capacity protected from other years. Maintenance of effort is a relatively new requirement, most on the public safety side. Because we continue to invest in our public safety, I don't expect that to be a problem either, but it's something that we'll continue to monitor. The adapted financial guidelines we talked about last time, and everything is aligned and doing good. And then, of course, the big one is the state-imposed levy limits, which I know I've talked about a lot, and you've all had to explain them as well, so I will skip those unless anybody has other questions on constraints. Okay, cruising through. So here's where I promised you, Alder Jetzer, I have a whole slide about why we should avoid structural deficits. And I've talked about it a little bit already. But what a structural deficit is when you are committing to something without having a financial plan to pay for it. And you're basically kicking that can down the road. Or you're just ignoring the fact that there's a financial implication and not planning for it. So some of the examples of things that we are very conscious about not doing would be doing a mid-year or planning for a mid-year hire of a new staff person, even though we know the following year we would want them to be here a whole year. So we always assume that we'll have a full year cost into the budget so that it's not causing a problem for the future. The use of fund balance for ongoing operations. In general, we're really good about this. We did talk during CIP time about that one exception where we are relying on fund balance for some capital stuff. But in the operating budget, we are not relying on fund balance for anything that's not planned for. So there is one use of fund balance that we use for retiree payments, but we have that full amount assigned. So all of that fund balance for what our obligation is today is 100% accounted for and planned for. We also make sure that we watch the levy limits and that we know when something will hit, that we have planned for that. A good example is a couple years ago with the hub custodian. So the council approved the hub building. We knew we wouldn't need the custodian until the hub was actually built, but there was a one-time strategy that was approved to kind of keep that money protected so that it was available when that custodian did need to come on. So again, a very conscious, very well thought out strategy when we're using our fund balance. And then always watching for one-time revenues matching one-time expenses and ongoing revenues matching ongoing expenses. So these are some of the tenets of what we believe is good budgeting and what we as a council, or you as a council, I suppose, really take seriously and I appreciate.
I will add another one,
Yeah,
is
please do.
using grant money to hire people.
Absolutely. Yep. Because eventually the grant money goes away and we of course do not want to talk about laying people off. Or maybe the grant requires us to keep them. So yep, we've been really good about planning for that and making sure that there's a plan and a realistic plan, right? Not a we just assume it'll figure itself out. We have been very good about making sure there's a plan. So that's my soapbox. So I hope that the council continues to be committed to kind of those main tenets about responsible budgeting and the value of it. A couple of small changes in the budget document that you'll see when it comes out in September. One is we did split forestry and parks into their own divisions. In the past, 2 staff members were using the same account number and it kind of got confusing. So we split that into 2 separate pieces. So you'll see a separate section for that. And then next steps. So our budgeting approach is mostly what's called zero-based budgeting, which is the departments have to account for everything that they want to do, kind of from the bottom up. There's some exceptions where we use trends and things like that, but it is a relatively old school approach to budgeting. But a lot of the same forms will look similar. The budget document itself will look similar to what you're used to. Next steps, the mayor's proposed budget will be released in September on the 19th. We have our special finance committee meetings on September 30th and October 1st. I hope everybody has got that on their calendars. Then there'll be a public hearing on October 14th. This is the chance for the public to comment about the mayor's proposal, to kind of share what they think is good or bad or otherwise about that proposal. And then council proposed amendments are due on the 16th. There'll be a form provided just like there was for the CIP process. They're still due at 4:30 on that day, just like for the CIP process. Excuse me. The one big difference, though, is you probably remember there's a lot more time during the CIP process for council to put together amendments because of how the budget schedule works and with how tight it is between when we get certain big numbers and when we have to know the numbers for the property tax bills. And with the different steps there's just not as much time. So I recognize it's only a couple of days after the public hearing, but it is 2 weeks after when the budget workshops are. And hopefully if you are kind of thinking about things, there's nothing to say you can't start exploring those now. So amendments will be due on the 16th of October. I will put together the packet. Staff can put in staff memos to provide additional information. That whole thing will go out to you and to the public in October 24th. On October 29th, we'll have a committee of the whole meeting. This is our regularly scheduled committee of the whole meeting. However, it's been bumped back a week. We did it on the 5th Wednesday. Again, that budget schedule is just so tight, and depending on how the days falls, it gets sticky. So thank you, President, for moving that over. So that's on the 29th. We'll have that. At that meeting, we will go through each one of the amendments and do all the discussion you have. So answer all of your questions or get all of your questions answered. Staff will be there to answer them. You guys can do all of the discussion you want. This is kind of the big meeting, right? This is the meeting that should take a while because it should take some time to work through these. But we said that's why we do it on that separate meeting. It's the only agenda item that night. That following council meeting then, there'll be another public hearing. That's where the public can weigh in on what the council amendments were. Then we'll vote on the amendments and then we'll adopt the budget. Now, the reason why I stress so much about the discussion on the amendments happening at the committee of the whole meeting is because when we get to council, it's very limited discussion. And so there's ordinances here. So the debate is limited in time. The number of times you're allowed to speak is limited. And the purpose of it is because all of that discussion should have happened at committee of the whole. And when we get to council, we're just bing, bang, boom, right? Going through all of those actual amending and voting and that type of a thing. The amendments for budget are similar to CIP, where we can make amendments to amendments. So if an amendment is proposed and you want to tweak it, that is allowed, but we will not do any new amendments from the floor, so that we can narrow that scope so that the public knows what we're talking about possibly changing, so that if it's something they're interested in, they know that they should be paying attention at that point, and they don't have to be worried about a surprise coming up. So you can amend amendments, but not anything brand new from the floor. There's also a mayor veto process, which I didn't even put in a slide because hopefully we won't have to do that, but it is an option there. I think it was talked about. Was it actually? I blocked it out, yeah. Yeah, there was a CIP that wasn't adopted. Yep, and then we had to do a whole new, like, what are we going to do now? Yeah, blocked that one out too. So that is next steps. So at this point, again, I knew it was going to be relatively quick. I think that's probably a good thing for after the long meeting y'all had last night. But I know the mayor would be interested in any feedback that you would have at this point. If you've got priorities that you want to kind of get out in the open, new initiatives you're thinking, services you think that we're currently providing that aren't as high of a priority that you're thinking about, maybe should be considered for cuts. If there's any, really initial information you'd like to be considered as we go into this process, this would be a great time to share that with all of us.
Who would like to comment? Bill?
I wonder if we could maybe level set before we talk about some of the priorities and or initiatives. Some things, that we typically look at, cost of living adjustments and what the impact is on the available levy. Correct me if any of my figures are off, since it's been a few months since I was out on the circuit talking about this regarding the referendum. But generally speaking, a 1% cost of living adjustment citywide is roughly $200,000 to $250,000. So, AKA a 2% increase would be, roughly $500,000. An increase in our net new construction of, say, 2% is roughly $500,000 to $600,000. No.
Gosh, you're really good at remembering these. Yeah, I don't remember any of those numbers
I'm
yet.
thinking that's the case, but...
That sounds right.
Last year was 2.9, was close to $700,000, isn't it?
That could be, yeah. So if you look at 3%, roughly, $250,000, $200,000 per percentage increase.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously employee benefits related to insurance, retirement, those contributions are all set by the state since we are a participant in the local government program for health insurance, as well as the Wisconsin retirement system. We budget for increases, but obviously that also equates to a significant cost oftentimes. So when you start looking at all of those things, and then oftentimes we have from a department head or others, well, I'd like to do X, and it's only $10,000. Well, 10 of those requests is $100,000. And I know I'm kind of being a little bit of a doomsday prepper here when I talk about all this stuff, but I just want to kind of level set to recognize for not only our common council, but our public, how thin the margins really are here just to maintain existing services. And the irony of the conversation that we just had about housing and how the city will grow. And I want to reiterate the message from last fall's referendum outreach. Without growth, we are cutting staff and reducing services. With growth, we are at least able to maintain existing services and staff. And of course, if we want to add any services or staff, more than likely it will require some change in funding at the state level or a referendum to allow that. So again, I don't want to be kind of the mood killer here, so to speak, but I at least wanted to get that out there for again, not only just our council members, but any members of the public who are asking. And I know the mayor has stated in a previous department head staff meeting that her commitment is maintaining existing staff levels at existing benefit levels and providing a reasonable cost of living adjustment as well. And if I'm incorrect on any of that, please let me know.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Scott. So this is the priority that my focus is, maintain. We are not going to lay off anyone. I want to retain, invest in staff, and provide the same benefit that they enjoy. So that one is my priority going to this budget, like I did last year. Priority is to maintain and retain staff and give them a call adjustment. Last year it was 2%. The ideal will be to give them the 3% if we have the capacity, but but we will see when we have the final net new construction number. But that one is one of the priority that I'm gonna, there is other. If there is no money, we had to do some cut. It's gonna be maybe supply or delay some program or project, but that one is a priority.
And our net new construction gets finalized August 15th, is it, by the DOR?
Yep, so we'll get our preliminary number August 1st. There's very few occasions where that's not exactly what's finalized on August 15th.
Misty, can you explain about the vehicle registration fee, how it's going to be implemented in the 2026 budget?
Yeah, so my understanding is that the majority of the available capacity because of the vehicle registration fee is going to be going towards certain initiatives. Mm-hmm. The vehicle registration fee itself has to be used on certain things, but then the money that's freed up can be used for other things. And so my hope that the mayor will agree is that we will put the full vehicle registration fee into our streets resurfacing project and then continue to supplement with levy to get up to what we're currently doing. We're not going to, I don't believe we intend to drop what we're currently doing, but kind of use that funding source instead. That will then free up levy capacity, and that levy capacity that's freed up could be used for other things, and that will be decided through the 2026 budget process. So mayor would have first decision as far as how she proposes to use that available funds, and then council through your amendment process could make changes if you so desire.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, and this has always been true ever since I was on council. This will be my 6th budget cycle, and it was always the case that I was told if you want to add something, you better have an offset.
It's like a debit and credit.
Yeah, but that is to say, if you want to add something that is from the levy, the property tax levy, there are other sources of funding. Yeah, so that's something to keep in mind as well. It's not only levy, but that is the vast majority of what the budget is. So, or what we're talking about. I also want to say we do a budget meeting, a special finance meeting over 2 nights. Because when it's one night, it becomes a little bit too much. So we split it over 2 nights. And it is I think it's one of the best. I mean, the CIP meeting is always great, but the budget meeting is one of the best of the year because not only is it about the budget document and what the city is, what the departments are doing, but they also talk about their accomplishments for the past year and talk about their plans for the coming year in a broader sense outside of just what the money is spent on. And I think it's a really interesting just look at what the city is doing and all the work that the departments are doing. And when you see how long these departments have been staffed at the exact same levels, and then you see what they're doing, what they're working on, I think it's absolutely fascinating. So I know council members can't always make it, but if you can, please try to attend or at minimum watch it on the back end because it is really valuable and it is the best way, I think, for people to understand what's happening in our city on a day-to-day basis. You can spend 4-ish hours of a meeting or two if you watch it in 2 times speed on YouTube. And really get a good sense of what the city does. So love that meeting every year.
Something from chat, we know that some of our departments are understaffed, and we also discuss what is the approach. Can you explain to the council going to this budget?
Yeah, I mean, the messaging has been obviously that there's not likely to be a significant amount of funding that won't be allocated or that will be unallocated and available to add staffing. I mean, as we've discussed, the priorities from the mayor are to maintain existing staff, provide benefit and cost of living adjustments, and therefore ideally maintain the existing services as well. What, if any, additional revenue that might be available from the property tax levy is not likely to sustain any full-time positions. If it does, I would suspect it would be maybe one, but I don't really anticipate that. So our departments have been advised of this. We've also asked them, particularly in light of the staff capacity issues, if they can identify in each of their departments any services or activities that they're currently providing our community that could be reduced or eliminated in an effort to either A, save money so that it could potentially be reallocated elsewhere, or increase staff capacity that could be used for either new things or other things that they're already expected to do that they're not able to get completed in the time and manner that they would like. We want to take a look at those things and see what our department heads and their teams are identifying for our consideration. So I think the harsh reality is absent, TID districts or TIDs closing, 20-year increases in shared revenue provided by the state, there's not likely to be any notable change in staffing, which again continues to present challenges for a number of budgets or departments throughout the city.
In the case that there is any capacity for new staff, we are going to follow the staffing study, the priorities. I don't know, for the new council member, there is a study that was done in 2023, Yeah,
the Baker-Tilly organizational study was completed. It's out on the city's website. I think we referenced it, and I think it's also linked in the council resource section of the website as well. So that will be our main focus. Obviously, there are things that do pop up based upon changing factors that might have slight deviations. And as Gabriela mentioned, funding sources can be different. For instance, utility rates might fund, fully or partially a position that directly works or partially works in a utility and therefore minimizes the impact or cost on the property tax levy. A limited term employee might be something that could be worked into the budget because of the fact that it would be, less expensive than a full-time employee, and funding might be available to at least get an LTE in to provide some measure of relief. The Senior Center has done an arrangement the last couple of years with an LTE where the Friends have fully or partially funded an LTE position. So getting, a bit more creative and looking at some of those options are things that the city is doing. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, there's just not enough revenue to go around to meet all of the need.
So if you have any, I don't know, we are going to discuss what are your priorities, or you want to email those to, I don't know. Do you have any priorities, or, I don't know.
The one I wanted to mention is that we have had a lot of conversation in transmission and transit about expanding bus transit.
I know, but,
and so I know we've had that conversation, but that is something that I
know that,
care about. So wanted to
Yeah, it's,
And I
yeah.
believe that's what other people there's other
Yeah.
people on the council that also would agree with me.
That was going to be my first mention as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Same.
I know that, yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that we're discussing this in a meeting, right?
Yeah.
So that the public too
Yeah.
can hear what your guys' initial priorities are. I think that's.
So that one is going to be one, I want to say how to reallocate some of the, the funding that you're moving from the transportation, we can reallocate to other buckets. I would say, the operational cost to maintain the police facility will be one of that. And that include to hire a new custodian, isn't it? Yeah. So you see that is part of the police facility. And also the expansion of the public transportation is going to be my other second priority, how to allocate the money. I think with EMS we can absorb in the tax increment, in the levy limit of the district.
So
Yeah.
with EMS districts,
Yeah.
if there's an intergovernmental change that changes the formula, we will get a levy limit adjustment for the increase, but then Verona has to take the decrease. That's simply the result of the formula change. So,
Oh.
that does not have to be absorbed within the rest of the budget.
Yeah, so that one is a good news because we, and the other thing that I tried to do in the 2023 budget, 24 budget, was to increase the base wage from the pay-on-call firefighter. It was a $9 an hour. We increased it to $12. If there is any capacity to increase it maybe to $15 to be minimum wage, you know what I mean? That one could be another, how to allocate some of that funding if there is capacity left.
So I know the Innovation Fund had rules change with the most recent state budget that passed. Do you have any sense of if that money is going to be able to be used for initiatives we already have that meet that criteria, or is it only because it's meant to create efficiency between municipalities? So our EMS district, Fitchburg EMS district, theoretically would qualify, or our MPSIS, that data sharing initiative we have across the different local, outside of City Madison cities. In theory, that would apply for that would meet the spirit of it, but we already do that, so it wouldn't qualify for Innovation Fund money.
It's great examples for other communities.
Yeah.
No,
Congratulations.
But
Take our
but
great
it has
idea.
to be. This is what I learned last week in the board retreat, because we went through all of that. Is it had to be existing services, And in the case of EMS, if we decided to say, you know what, we are going to bring fire to the district. That one is when the innovation grant will kick off, because we say we can bring Fitchburg fire to the district, we can bring Verona fire to the district, or Oregon fire, and then you create like a regional district with fire and EMS, and then you can apply to because that one could be an example. You can also apply to IT, to assessment, to HR. There's a list, that you can, you can use that innovation. But it shouldn't be for new services. It had to be existing services.
I think this would be a good opportunity for me to just ask the council, or at least give them a heads up. Last night you had the referral for the updated Fitchburg EMS intergovernmental agreement. And one thing that the mayor and I have talked about is adding an agenda item under new business at the next council meeting that would also just refresh the discussion that we had last year as to what the Common Council would prefer staff work on, if anything, in regards to long-term fire and EMS service for the city. Do you have a desire for us to explore other options in what we are currently doing with regard to city-based fire and district-based EMS? So that is a question that you will likely see coming from me next Common Council meeting on the 12th. So just as a heads up.
Recommendation that you think about this and also do some research. You can also talk to the new fire chief, because I think when he was in Colorado, there was he has a lot of experience on this, and he bring another perspective. Because I was reluctant at the beginning about this, to have a district, you know what I mean? But now the more I think, the more where the money is going in the state is going toward to create this regional district to be more efficient. Because you don't need every small municipality to have like a $3 million ladder, you know what I mean? So I think we need to have that conversation eventually because, I think we can work, what we say, we can work with Verona, we can work with Oregon, you know what I mean? Looking at the future, how do we envision? And also because districts have a better benefit, levy limit, the levy limit is, the formula is, I think is better than the one that we get as a city. So I don't know, that one is something that for you to think about.
I had one question. I know we have some like interns this summer. So we have 3 school districts. Do any of the high schools have like apprenticeship or like co-op programs? I mean, I participated in like a business co-op program in high school where I worked they got me a job at a credit union, and that was my part-time job after school. Do we know if any of the school districts have things like that could kind of take day-to-day administrative work off of the plate of some of the departments?
Nothing immediately comes to mind. I had a tour of the new Verona High School when it opened and obviously saw the areas in which they could potentially have certain apprenticeships or at least skill building, which could be beneficial in certain departments. I know our public safety teams work with the schools, and our fire department in particular has an extensive internship program, and our police department, I believe, has just had a intern the last couple of years as well. Again, Public Works has historically hired college interns, 3 of them, 1 for each of their divisions every year. Human Resources had an intern last year. Planning has an intern this year. So we do rely on internships. More often than not, it's at the college level. To help with some projects, initiatives, or other tasks during the summertime. But we don't necessarily have a formalized relationship with any particular school, college, or high school.
One other thing, I don't know if there's I know we applied for the City of Madison to be part of the CARES expansion, and we were not selected for that. It went to Sun Prairie, I think. Has there been any discussion or any knowledge of whether or not Madison is interested in further expanding that program or next year, or is that something that's going to remain static?
I haven't heard anything either, and if my recollection is correct, I think that was a 3-year grant that was provided to the city of Sun Prairie. So I guess what I suspect is that they'll evaluate that expansion into Sun Prairie for a 3-year period before they would determine whether or not they're going to add any additional municipalities. I could be wrong, but I've not heard any outreach from anyone that they're looking to expand at this point.
Okay. Yeah, it probably doesn't make sense for 2026, but that's certainly something I'd love to see come to the city. But obviously that's not something that we would necessarily implement on our own.
Well, we try.
Or innovation fund money.
But the other thing is Dane County also, it depends also in the Dane County budget, how much money is allocated to the CARES program too.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
We need to reach out to our rep in Dane County to increase that.
I think this will come as no surprise given my professional background, but I would like to see us focus where we can on improving communication wherever, whether that's, capital related, which deadlines passed, for future, or, staffing, or, we recognize the need clearly in the referendum. That was one of the positions that would have been funded, was a communications director. But one of the things I've heard pretty universally is I don't have a great idea of what's going on. And I think, we heard earlier tonight about trying to reach people where they are. And I think that's the strategy we really need to focus on is we can't just rely on the Fitchburg Star and FACTv, as great as they are. We need to also be getting out and doing that outreach in that neighborhood level outreach. So I would like to see wherever we can. It's not my top priority, but it's up there that I'd like to see however we can find ways to take what we're already doing and repurpose it. I know I was chatting with FACTv tonight about could we take our Talking Fitchburg video broadcast and make it into a podcast? I see Alder Jetzer's ears perking up here.
I've been saying that for years.
Yes.
I would listen to it every morning.
Yes. And and so, that wouldn't, things like that are not reinventing the wheel. And it's kind of, if you put on like the private sector hat, it's extracting more value from a little additional work, whereas, you don't have to put a ton of extra effort into doing it. So however, another idea, things like can we be doing more to reach out at the parks, putting up more flyers, having some of the TVs that have the community calendar, things like that. I'd like to see us prioritize improving communication and reaching residents more, whether that's in an outreach specialist position down the road or making some changes within our FACTv team to broaden it into a wider communications team and leveraging some of their additional expertise and knowledge. I think that would be of great benefit to our city, so that when we have people coming in for board of review and wondering about what's going on with why does my tax or my assessment go up 20%? Does that mean my taxes are going up 20%? We don't have to kind of have as many of the same conversations.
Other thoughts from the council? Anyone online? I don't see any hands. All right. Well, seeing no more comments from the committee, we can wrap the conversation. Thank you so much, Misty. Appreciate it. Always really interesting, and look forward to the rest of the process. Our next item of business is 7 announcements. Our next committee of the whole meeting will be August 27, 2025. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Alder Jetzer, second by Alder Lettice. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:33 p.m. Thank you.